Hi, this is Fuad Abasov, a broker with Right at Home Realty, and this is your monthly real estate statistics. The latest numbers are in, and here's a quick look at what happened across the Toronto and GTA real estate market in May 2025, including both resale and new home activity, along with some insights on where the market might be heading. While some headlines suggest momentum, the real story in May 2025 is more nuanced. There was movement, but not momentum in the traditional spring market sense. It's been a slow grind, with pockets of activity and a more balanced tone. While May is traditionally a busy month in the real estate calendar, this year's spring market felt muted and cautious. Sales volume increased slightly compared to April and the same period last year, but many buyers and agents, myself included, noted a hesitant and price-sensitive market. High interest rates, tighter lending, and economic uncertainty continued to weigh on both demand and seller expectations. There are selective buyers and there are overpriced listings, sitting longer than expected. In the resale market, total home sales were up by roughly 8% year over year, but that's coming off a historically low base. The average sale price across the GTA sat around $1.14 million, a modest 2.5% increase year over year, driven largely by demand in select Toronto neighborhoods and well-priced properties in the 905 region. Detached homes in the City of Toronto and 905 area averaged around 1.72 million. Semi-detached and townhomes remained popular among move-up buyers and downsizers alike. The condo market also saw steady, though not spectacular, activity, with the GTA average hovering around $730,000 and Toronto condos closer to $760,000. Demand remained stronger for well-located entry-level units, particularly from the first-time buyers and investors chasing rental yield. In the new home and condo segment, developers continued to tread carefully. Several new condo launches in North York, Vaughan, and Mississauga offered extended deposit structures and capped levies to entice buyers. However, low-rise new builds remained a harder sell unless they were sharply priced or offered flexible terms. The average price for new low-rise homes held around $1.6 million, while new condo launches were priced near $1,250 per square foot in Toronto core. On the policy side, the Bank of Canada held its key interest rate steady once again in May, signaling that inflation is gradually easing. With inflation tracking closer to 2.5% range, many in the industry now anticipate a possible rate cut later this summer or early fall. That could finally unlock some of the pent-up demand sitting on the sidelines. Looking ahead, the market is expected to remain balanced, with local pockets of strength, especially for well-priced homes in move-in condition. If borrowing costs ease in the second half of the year, we could see a pickup in buyer activity, particularly in the condo segment and suburban freehold markets. That said, we're unlikely to see the kind of red-hot market we experienced in previous years. This is shaping up to be a steady, cautious market driven by real demand, not speculation. And now, let's take a closer look at detached home sales in Toronto and surrounding areas. Average selling price of detached home in Toronto in May was $1.71 million, 6.26% decline compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 6.8%. The amount of new listings went up by almost 18%. On average, it takes 21 days for a detached home to be sold in Toronto today. In Vaughan, average selling price of a detached home in May was $1.67 million, 7.3% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 8.5%. New listings were up by 23.5%. On average, it takes 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Vaughan today. In Richmond Hill, average selling price of a detached home in May was $1.87 million, 9% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 2.5%, new listings were up by 28.9%. On average, it takes 31 days for a detached home to be sold in Richmond Hill. Average price of detached home in Mississauga in May was $1.47 million, 5.7% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 30%, new listings were up by 9%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Mississauga today. In Markham, average selling price of detached home in May was $1.67 million, almost 6% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were up by 24%, new listings were also up by 54%. On average, it takes 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Markham today. In Newmarket, average selling price of detached home in May was $1.24 million, 5.5% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales are at the same level where they were last year, and new listings were up by 26.5%. On average, it takes 21 days for a detached home to be sold in Newmarket today. In Aurora, average selling price of detached home remained the same as it was last month and is sitting at $1.56 million, 8% decline compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 10%, listings were up by 11.5%. On average, it takes 26 days for a detached home to be sold in Aurora today. In Innisfil, average selling price of detached home in May was $965,000, 6% increase compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 10.5%, new listings were up by 14%. On average, it takes 31 days for a detached home to be sold in Innisfil today. In King City, average selling price of detached home in May was $3.15 million, 6.5% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 71%, new listings were down by 28%. On average, it takes 39 days for a detached home to be sold in King City today. In Bradford, average selling price of detached home in May was $1.12 million, 9.3% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 19%, new listings went up by 13.5%. On average, it takes 26 days for a detached home to be sold in Bradford today. In Milton, average selling price of detached home in May was $1.25 million, almost 8% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 14.4%, new listings were also down by 3.5%. On average, it takes 19 days for a detached home to be sold in Milton today. In Stoufville, average selling price of detached home in May was $1.43 million, 12.6% decline compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 10.8%, new listings were up by 10%. On average, it takes 34 days for a detached home to be sold in Stoufville today. In Barrie, average selling price of detached home in May was $832,000, 3.6% decline compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 27.8%, new listings were up by 15%. On average, it takes 28 days for a detached home to be sold in Barrie today. In Oakville, average selling price of detached home was $1.95 million in May, 1.24% decrease compared to May of last year. Sales were down by 26.5%, new listings were also down by 8.9%. On average, it takes 25 days for a detached home to be sold in Oakville today. If you're considering buying, selling, or investing this year, the current environment presents a unique window to plan strategically and stay ahead of the curve. I'd be happy to walk you through what's happening in your specific area or help you prepare for the opportunities that lie ahead.
If you'd like to receive your own personalized sales report about home sales in your neighborhood, please call me at 647-801-3401 or email me at sold@fuadhomes.com. Thanks for watching and see you next month.